Good afternoon, everybody. Firstly, thanks to Ian, Simon and Mike for inviting me to come and talk today. Similarly to Ambrose, I've scripted some of my presentation today in case I forget anything, so apologies if I read sections out. I wanted to just talk a little bit about my analysis today, just an introduction of why I've chosen this particular piece, and some of the implications for this analysis in terms of this relationship between acousmatic music theory, I guess you could call it, and its then application to some electronic dance music. And I'll finish up with some reflection on the contribution to the Orama project. So I want to start with the intention behind the analysis, what I was actually doing with it, hopefully some of its impact or lack thereof, why this particular piece and its intended use. So the intention behind the analysis really was to see how current electroacoustic music thinking, acousmatic music in particular, can be applied to forms of modern dance music, and in particular using Dennis Smalley's spectral morphology, which seems to have come up a couple of times today already, and also Simon's language grid, and how we can use these tools to firstly find out what's going on inside these pieces of music, and to hopefully encourage others to grasp these quite difficult concepts. I've used acousmograph to undertake this analysis. I enjoy the real-time or non-real-time representation that the sonogram gives, first of all. What I find when listening to more complicated music, certainly in the concert situation, is sometimes it does something inside the piece of music and you're trying to keep up with it, you're trying to catch up with it. So I enjoy this non-real-time process of displaying things inside a piece of music. And I think that allows us to point out certain elements, certainly ideas of spectral morphology inside pieces of music. So, for example, where we can point out causal linkages, that kind of idea. So the impact of the analysis then, what I'm hoping that this will achieve is to act as a point of departure for a wider analysis and discussion of the genre, and hopefully to serve as a way to begin linking forms of exploratory electronic music, both perhaps more commercial, and very much inverted commas there, with forms of acousmatic music. Why have I chosen this piece? The piece is by a chap called Monolake. It was chosen for its deliberate use of concrete sounds and concrete ways of dealing with sound. So the way the sounds are composed and the way they interact with each other inside the piece of music. The chap that wrote this piece of music, Robert Henker, is associated not just with composition of electronic dance music, but also software development, multi-channel performances, installations, and thinking inside this field as well. But rather than detracting from the value of this analysis, I assert that this actually enhances its importance, because there are people who are active inside IDM, or post-IDM, as we should call it now, who are thinking about these things and encouraging the deployment of these ideas inside post-IDM. The intended use of this analysis, the last point on this slide, is to begin explaining how we might use theory from the realms of acousmatic music to explain what we're hearing inside some forms of commercial electronic music. The original incarnation of this analysis was intended as a teaching tool for my undergraduates at Staffordshire University. There are some things I'll talk about there in a second, because what it actually did was, in some situations, is to give my my students a way of using beats inside music rather than exploring musical sounds and their relationship to each other. So the analysis itself then, as you can see, this is a screenshot just of acousmograph. I won't go into this in too much detail, it's a very quick outline really, but the piece starts out with a collection of mimetic sounds in a mid-distance space frame which have a loose causal relationship with drier sounding metallic material which they introduce. So in this sonogram analysis here you can see I've pointed out these sections which introduce this kind of dry sounding metallic sound that comes after it. I was going to play some examples today, but time didn't allow this really. So this interaction shifts from the opening timbre to a more metallic sound, which indicates a link between sound-emitting objects and the object imparting the energy that causes the sonification to occur. As this timbral shift takes place, the sound frame moves closer, and the more reverberant material gives way to sounds which are dry and contain less low-frequency content, and that's what you see inside this first opening section. The kick drum morphology inside the piece. So the piece is, as I said, it's a piece of IDM, electronica, we call it, I suppose, which has these fixed sound objects inside it. So the use of a drum machine is just one of them. But inside the individual hits of this particular sound, there are these subtle morphologies that are taking place inside the sound. So this collection of sounds is synthetic and percussive in nature, and sets a familiar rhythm and tone signature-based structure, which much of the rest of the material in the work is ranged around. Whilst these sounds are from a source not normally associated with spectral morphological behaviour, the kick drum, drum machine, some subtle morphology is present within the arrangement of these sounds in the form of this shifting timbral component. So you can see that inside this diagram here, where not every single kick drum you see in here is the same. There are subtle shifts within inside this panel. I've had some feedback on the RMA website, which I'll talk about in a second as well. So on to causal linkage and growth processes. Around 23 seconds into the piece, so at the beginning of this window here, we see our first causal relationship between the gestural metallic sound, that's this section in green here, excuse me, instigates the onset of a textural elongated synthetic sound, and that's this kind of section here which has this growth process going on, which I've hopefully kind of captured there with the purple section of this window. This forms a building block for many of the compositional components within the rest of the work, which appear around 16-bar pattern. So you've got this kind of idea of looping within inside this work with looping elements inside it. So you've got these repeating patterns inside repetitive patterns almost, but all based around these ideas of what I can hear is spectral morphologies taking place inside it. The piece remains primarily gesture carried, but there are textures as well inside the work. So on to energy motion trajectories then. This is what I was talking about with this 16-bar repeating phrase where things seem to come into motion and then slowly die off again. And this happens at this 2 minutes 18 section. The beginning of this phrase is set in motion by the previously mentioned synthetic sound, this kind of open hi-hat sound here. And causal linkage between these elements is prominent in this particular section. Towards the end of the phrase, spectral life appears to die down over time, only to be re-energized by the repeating section. So this is a 16-bar loop, if you like, here. And I don't know if you can just about see the end here, but that's another onset of the 16-bar phrase that's going to happen at the beginning. So there are these larger cycles happening inside this work, which is made up of smaller cycles itself. Zooming onto space frames really quickly, the sound first heard at 3 minutes 49 instigates a brief compositional shift. And this is really one of the key components of this piece, which has this idea of spectral morphology inside it. It's kind of like a guitar string or something that's behaving like a guitar string being set in motion, which then morphs and shifts, moves in terms of its space, so it becomes more distant, and as it moves through this space, it then transforms into something else, which is behaving in a similar way, more like a plastic kind of sounding object which is being dropped and behaving in a very Newtonian, physical manner. So behaves in a similar way to the guitar string that kind of started out. So you've got this real spectral shift that takes place, and as it does so, it moves from a very close space frame to a very distant one. So just very briefly, just talking about the comments that I've received so far. Firstly, thanks to Mike and Ambrose for providing some feedback. The causal links inside the piece, it's been suggested that they might not be as strong as I initially indicated due to the interactions of weakly source-bonded material and strongly source-bonded material. That's really helped me to, I guess, grow my own analysis and to be kind of critical with my own work, so thanks for that. And the discussion on the drum machine as well was useful to, again, receive some feedback on and the relevance of that. So just finishing up, some additional further work. I'll be undertaking additional analyses which will further explore current acousmatic music theories and their relationship with IDM, post-IDM, and perhaps more importantly, through analysis, I'm keen to uncover what additional tools we may need to explore this form of music, and the ultimate goal being to identify and enhance the vocabulary we are using to explain this form of electronic music. There's a brief bibliography, and if you have any questions, very brief, I'll put that back up. If you have any questions.